Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. To the elites, thank you so much. You already know my love comes back tenfold. If you're new to the channel, please leave a like and a comment. It helps the channel out by letting the algorithm know that you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to become part of Back to Ashes, please hit that subscribe button and set your bell notification to all. That way you know every time I upload a video. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's Vocal Melatonin, entitled True Scary Stories, Part 2. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. During the late 1970s and 1980s, I was raised in Florida at the height of the cocaine cowboys era, a time when the state resembled a frontier outpost more than a vacation paradise. Unsolved killings filled the papers, and Miami's murder statistics frequently tied with Los Angeles for the title of America's deadliest city, the two trading blows in grim headlines week after week. My father had spent decades with the U.S. Postal Service. He started as a carrier walking routes, but by then, he had moved indoors to a supervisory role, managing schedules, routes, and logistics from the main office. When I hit 16, he arranged for me to take a summer job as a mail carrier. The work itself was simple and repetitive. Letters went into mailboxes, parcels onto porches or doorsteps. I didn't mind. I was handed the keys to a 4-door Oldsmobile Cutlass, complete with cold air conditioning and a working radio. Pure luxury for a teenager. Cruising around blasting my favorite tunes while earning a little cash felt like freedom. Dad no longer delivered mail himself, but his years on the street had taught him every danger zone in the city. He never let me forget which areas demanded extra caution, constantly reminding me to stay sharp. One muggy morning in early summer, my route carried me to the distant fringes of town, places locals called the country, where asphalt gave way to graded dirt roads and houses began to feel more like isolated homesteads. Most residents here got their mail in tall roadside cluster boxes, each slot neatly labeled. I always hit those first. I hated the idea of loose mail tumbling around the back seat. The tubs kept things sorted by stop. If they spilled, I'd be sorting by hand. And with my dad overseeing the office I'd return to, bringing back any mail, even flyers, was unacceptable. I was crouched at one of those boxes, slotting envelopes, when a car eased past. I looked up and gave my usual big friendly wave. Plenty of folks on the route recognized the teenage mail kid by now. This car, though, didn't belong. Dark tinted windows you couldn't see through. Polished chrome wheels flashing in the sun. It had the unmistakable swagger of something you'd spot cruising the wealthier downtown streets. To my 16-year-old eyes, it looked straight up pimp, the coolest thing imaginable in that era, especially to a white kid growing up in Florida. The wheels drifted by slowly, setting off an instinctive unease. It felt wildly out of place in those backwoods surroundings. I wondered if it might be an undercover cop. Some of my classmates had fathers on the force who drove flashy cars for plainclothes work, or so the stories went. I kept it in the corner of my eye without staring, not wanting to invite trouble. Florida back then, and honestly still, had a reputation that made your imagination run to hitmen. abductions, anything dark. The car disappeared down the road. I told myself it was nothing. Then it braked hard, lurched backward into a nearby driveway, swung around, and started coming straight back toward me. Adrenaline surged. I steadied my breathing, the way my karate lessons had taught. Feet set, ready, if it came to it, for a wild spinning kick. The sedan approached and rolled right past. Inside, I glimpsed an older couple in their Sunday clothes, looking bewildered and harmless. They gave a polite wave and kept going, obviously lost. The false alarm left me jumpy. That slow, deliberate turnaround had lit every nerve. I stayed on edge for hours afterward, a feeling that, thanks to growing up in that version of Florida, never entirely left me. Personal security became something I never took lightly again. A few larger parcels still needed door delivery, so I stuck to my usual pattern. Furthest house first, working backward, so the last stop left me near the main road home. The outermost address that day was a small, light package. Nothing heavy, but the street was one Dad had warned me about repeatedly. The place sat buried in dense trees and brush, almost hidden. A high fence surrounded the property. The gate was locked and carried a clear no trespassing sign. I was about to turn around when I noticed a smaller handwritten note taped to it. Mailman. In that instant, I understood the mailman sign might have been someone's cruel joke. I yanked the pepper spray free, flipped the nozzle forward, aimed at the dog, and pressed the button. Nothing happened the way it should. In my frantic scramble to draw it, I turned the nozzle backward. A thick cloud of spray erupted directly between us. We both caught the full blast. For the next 15 minutes or so, the dog and I thrashed around in the dirt, yelping and clawing at our faces. No one was home to hear us. Eventually, the worst of the burning eased, leaving us both effectively blind and unable to smell. I knew the dog, now even angrier, would still want blood if it found me. I rolled sideways into the open yard, remembering there were no obstacles there to trip over. For nearly half an hour, I crept forward on hands and knees, then tiptoed where I could stand, freezing every time I made noise or sensed the dog nearby. It prowled, sniffing, coming close more than once. I held perfectly still until it moved off. Finally, I reached the fence, slipped through the gate, and collapsed against the cutlass's bumper. I sat there for a long time, rinsing my eyes with water from a bottle, but the swelling and burning refused to fade quickly. Eventually, a passing driver stopped and asked if I was okay. This time, the sound of approaching tires didn't spike my panic. They called the post office. Dad drove out and finished my remaining deliveries, got the car back, and took me home. Dad asked along the way why I had to use pepper spray. I told him it was for the dog in the yard. I was trying to keep him away from me while I delivered my last package. What my dad said next sent a chill down my spine. Son, there's no dog in that yard. The old lady that used to live in that house died 3 years ago. Then why did I have a package to deliver to that address? I asked. That package was sent back to the sender 3 years ago when the lady died. That's the first time I've seen that thing in years, he said, with a look of concern on his face. I didn't ask him any more questions. He started poking fun at my red, puffy eyes and didn't stop laughing for the rest of the weekend. I didn't care about the laughing. What scared me more was, why did I get attacked by a dog? And why was there a package from 3 years ago in my bag? I'm a woman in my 30s, living by myself in a modest little house tucked at the very end of a peaceful cul-de-sac in the UK. The neighborhood is a confusing web of winding streets, far removed from any busy main road. Apart from the odd delivery driver or persistent salesperson, the only faces I see are familiar ones. I might not know every neighbor's name, but I recognize their appearances, their cars, and which houses they belong to. This unsettling series of events unfolded over several months, a few years ago now. I work from home, so I'm almost always here, sometimes with plenty of free time on my hands. It began on a quiet, idle afternoon around 4 p.m. I was lounging on the sofa, half watching some silly documentary about extraterrestrial conspiracies, when a knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I glanced at the hidden camera tucked into the wooden porch canopy above the entrance. There stood a woman who appeared to be in her late 40s or early 50s, impeccably dressed in high-end clothing and jewelry, far too luxurious for our modest area. She looked tense and restless, repeatedly peering toward the rear of the property before trying to peer through the small, frosted pane in the door. In her hand dangled an empty dog lead, no pet attached. At the far end of my backyard, two hedges run parallel, one marking my property, the other belonging to the local council, bordering a strip of open grass where dog walkers pass. There's a persistent gap in that council hedge. I've reported it countless times over the years, but nothing ever gets fixed. I can't access it from my side. Seeing the lead, I immediately assumed a dog had slipped through and wandered off. If it was small enough, it might have squeezed into my garden. I keep some leftover cooked meat handy, and being a lifelong dog lover, my own childhood pet once vanished for weeks, leaving me devastated until he returned. I felt compelled to help reunite this woman with her animal. I opened the door. The moment our eyes met, she gave me an odd, startled expression, as though she'd anticipated someone entirely different standing there. My mother had lived here years earlier, so I brushed it off at first. Perhaps she was expecting her. I greeted her politely. She simply stared at me for what felt like an eternity, easily half a minute, before pushing past my shoulder with her gaze and demanding to see Margaret. I apologized instinctively. Why do we do that when it's their mistake? Anyway, explaining there was no Margaret here, her face darkened with frustration. Yes, there is, she snapped. Confused, I mentioned a distant relative named Margaret who lived miles away, wondering if addresses got mixed up. I even offered the surname. She hissed back. You know precisely what I mean. What have you done with her? I was completely baffled. I've owned this house for 2 decades. I know the previous owner's name, and no Margaret ever lived here in living memory. None of the neighbors or past residents matched that name either. I reiterated that she had the wrong place, but she insisted, reciting my exact address. You're lying, she said coldly. Alarm bells rang. She wasn't confused about the location. She was convinced I'd done something to this non existent Margaret. Then I noticed her wrapping the dog lead tightly around her fist, knuckles whitening, as if readying it as a makeshift weapon. I'd taken self defense classes in my younger days, so I wasn't terrified. But the situation was escalating fast. I didn't want to fight on my doorstep with a stranger. I partially closed the door to limit her reach and suggested calmly that if she believed something had happened to her friend, she should contact the police. Her response was to slam her wrapped fist into the door. The impact shattered the frosted glass pane. Blood appeared on her hand, yet she showed no reaction to the pain. That unnerved me more than anything. She seemed impervious, fearing she might be under the influence of something dangerous. I raised my voice, told her in no uncertain terms to back off, and warned that I was dialing 999. If she stayed, the police could handle her. She tried to force the door open, but I pushed back hard enough to shut and lock it. I stayed close while making the emergency call so she could hear me. Through the camera feed, I watched her pace out of view, likely circling to the back, calling out for Margaret repeatedly. Just before the officers arrived, she furiously toppled my wheelie bins. Then came the most disturbing moment. She returned to the front, stared straight into my concealed camera, raised her middle finger, drew a finger across her throat in a slicing motion, and strolled away casually, never once glancing back. The police arrived eventually, took my statement, accepted a copy of the footage, and left. Follow-up calls went nowhere. The incident left me rattled for weeks. I relocated the knife block nearer the door, hidden from view, stayed up late, slept poorly. Exhaustion brought on strange auditory tricks. I'd hear phantom voices, especially hers repeating, "Margaret." Every gate creaked, set my nerves on end. I obviously reviewed the camera footage daily. Slowly, life normalized, and I chalked it up to a bizarre one-off. Until 4 or 5 weeks later, just past midnight. I was in the living room, scrolling on my phone with the TV murmuring quietly for company, when a car door thudded shut outside. Peering through the curtains, I saw a dark estate car, or a station wagon to some, parked at the end of my drive. Moments later, the gate groaned open, followed by knocking. The night vision camera confirmed it was her, lead in hand again. She glared directly into the lens, her eyes unnaturally dark, voids in the infrared. Then she shouted, "Turn off that noise and get out here." The TV was barely audible, even indoors. Impossible for her to hear from the outside. Convinced she was unstable, I rang the police again. They promised someone soon, but wouldn't stay on the line. She kicked the bins once more, yelled incoherently, and eventually drew a neighbor outside. The neighbor spoke with her. She gestured angrily at my neighbor, still ranting about Margaret and what I'd supposedly done. He managed to coax her away and lingered to ensure she left. The police arrived too late. Another statement, more footage, still no resolution. The next day, the neighbor apologized for not noting her number plate. She told him the same story. Desperate for sense, I wondered, could Margaret be her missing dog? Had one slipped through the hedge gap? Did she believe I'd taken or harmed it? One more week passed before the final visit. 3 a.m. Knocking woke me, then tapping shifted room to room, bedroom window included. She muttered through the glass words like noise, racket, maybe insults. She'd spray painted over the camera lens this time. Calling the police again felt pointless. They'd likely dismiss me if she vanished before they arrived. I wanted insight, listening as she circled. Eventually, another knock. I called through the door. Is Margaret your dog? Silence. I stood frozen for ages, probably over an hour, until dawn crept in. No sign of her through the window. Cautiously, I opened the door, armed with whatever was handy, and checked everywhere. The garden was empty. The gate, loud when moved, was closed tight. Impossible for her to have slipped out silently. Then I saw it. Liar, scrawled in spray paint across the front wall, the dog lead discarded beneath it. That was the end of direct encounters. Yet the unease lingers. Some nights the creeping sensation returns. I glance out and occasionally spot a dark estate car idling along the street. Not right at my drive anymore, but close enough. I can't prove it's her, but the feeling persists. She's still out there, watching, perhaps convinced one day she'll catch me with her Margaret. For over 2 decades, I've walked these decaying streets ever since the turn of the millennium. The same familiar poisons surface night after night, bruised relationships exploding into violence, quick grabs for cash or drugs, lives quietly dissolving in addiction's grip. Yet, every so often, a deeper shadow arrives, one that doesn't merely pass through you, but settles inside, cold and permanent, reminding you that true darkness has no bottom. The call came in routine, almost bored. Dispatch's voice cut through the static. Possible dead body, Building C, Central Housing Project. Approach carefully. That single word, carefully, landed heavier than usual. My partner Daniels and I toured the addresses under a sky bleeding sodium orange from the streetlights. The complex rose ahead like a forgotten ruin, concrete stained by decades of neglect, windows either boarded or gaping like missing teeth. We parked amid broken glass and oil-slicked puddles. The moment I opened the door, the smell hit. Sour urine, mildew, the unmistakable sweet rot of something dead, long enough to announce itself. It wasn't just odor. It felt alive, pressing against the skin. Daniels caught my eye. This one feels wrong already, he said quietly, fingers brushing his service weapon. I gave a short nod. We'd answered calls here countless times. Overdoses, fights, the everyday despair. But a corpse changed the air. It invited something heavier to watch. The entry hall had a landfill of discarded lives, overflowing dumpsters, stained mattresses, wall tags with a looping, angry script that seemed to writhe at the edge of vision. Our boots crunched over debris as we navigated the dim corridors toward Building C. The building appeared to lean inward, corridors narrowing as though funneling us deliberately towards its center. I took point, Daniels a step behind, his breathing tight. The huge, uneven letter C dominated the wall near the stairwell entrance, drawn in thick, dripping strokes that caught the feeble overhead bulb and shimmered wetly. Not spray paint, something thicker. We exchanged a silent look and eased the unlocked door open. The hinges groaned softly, almost welcoming. Flashlights carved narrow tunnels through the gloom. Halfway up the first flight of stairs lay the body, sprawled unnaturally, arms and legs bent in ways that mocked human anatomy. No dramatic pool of blood, no obvious knife wounds, just heavy discoloration across the face and a stillness so complete it felt staged. Footprints crisscrossed the concrete around him. People had passed by, stepped over, or beside, for who knows how long. We secured the door with a wedge. Better not get trapped inside with whatever had done this. As we worked, a man stepped away from a nearby apartment door. Tall, composed, almost cheerful. "Evening, officers. Need any assistance?" His tone was too smooth, too helpful. Daniels kept his light steady while I answered. "We're here about the deceased on the stairs." The man glanced down casually. "Yeah, noticed him earlier today. Looked gone for a while." Sympathy colored his words, but his eyes stayed sharp, measuring. Backup rolled in soon after, lights flashing across the cracked walls. The man drifted away, not toward the ground floor unit he'd emerged from, but upward, disappearing into the stairwell's upper darkness with one last glance over his shoulder. When the crime scene finally turned the body and lifted the clothing, the truth emerged in ugly pieces. Dozens of puncture wounds, grid-like burns seared deep into the skin. Someone had used heated household appliances, held in place for agonizing minutes, maybe hours. The medical examiner's report later confirmed the worst. Virtually no blood remained in the body. Drained, methodically, professionally. This was no impulsive killing, no drug-fueled rage. It was deliberate cruelty stretched over days. Weeks dragged past, each patrol a reminder of that stairwell's cold echo. Then came the arrest photo circulating through the department. The same calm, helpful neighbor. His name was Marcus. He and his partner, Lena, lived directly above the scene. The victim, Ethan, was someone they knew, a drinking buddy. Maybe more, depending on the night. An argument ignited late one evening. Voices rose, furniture scraped, then thuds and muffled cries. Ethan tried to escape. They pulled him back. For 3 full days, they kept him bound in their apartment. Cigarette burns, torn nails, deliberate mutations designed to prolong suffering without killing too quickly. Neighbors later admitted hearing sounds, thumps, stifled screams, strange mechanical clicks. But no one dialed 911. No one knocked. TV stayed on. Doors stayed closed. On the final day, when Ethan finally stopped fighting, they cleaned him up in the bathtub, watching contusions slowly pale under running water. Then came the exsanguination. Careful incisions, collected blood spiraling down the drain until only a dry husk remained. They dressed the remains in old clothes, carried him into the stairwell, dropped him like trash. 10 hours later, we arrived, right on schedule for their little performance. Marcus and Lena now sit in separate cells, but the real weight lingers elsewhere, in those paper-thin walls, in the dozens of people who heard torment meters away in Joe's silence, in the knowledge that monsters rarely arrive as strangers. They come as friends, as neighbors, as the person who smiles and offers help while standing over fresh death. I still walk these streets. The shadows feel closer now. The quiet feels louder. And every closed door I pass reminds me the true terror isn't always the hand that strikes. Sometimes it's the hands that never reach for the phone. During a leisurely road trip through Tennessee, my close friend and I decided to make a detour to the historic Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, planning to set up camp in the surrounding area for the night. We'd spent part of the drive researching its dark past, the notorious maximum security facility that once housed some of the state's most dangerous inmates. Joining us was a mutual acquaintance of my friend, a woman deeply fascinated by the paranormal. Her main motivation for the visit was to hunt for spirits, though the rest of us were equally drawn to the prison's grim history and imposing presence. Up close, the sight was truly daunting. This enormous, drab gray structure loomed starkly against the rugged mountain backdrop, enveloped by dense forests typical of rural Tennessee. The vibrant, almost pulsating greenery of the trees and rolling hills contrasted sharply with the unnatural, hulking mass of concrete and steel that seemed utterly out of place in such a natural setting. That day, there were no scheduled tours, events, or concerts, so the entire area felt unusually deserted and still. We pulled into an empty parking lot and made our way on foot toward the main building. To our astonishment, as we approached the central courtyard, we discovered the main gate standing wide open. With no signs prohibiting entry or any staff in sight, we figured it was permissible and ventured inside to explore. In the courtyard, we spotted two men casually tossing a ball to a big dog. We acknowledged them from afar, but didn't pay much attention until the dog ambled over in our direction, curious about the newcomers. One of the men then approached us and struck up a conversation. Rather than the usual pleasantries like asking about our travels, he immediately questioned our purpose there. He probed whether we were part of an organized tour group. When we explained we weren't, he revealed he was hired by the property owner for some maintenance work and insisted that we weren't authorized to be on the grounds. He offered no details about his tasks or why the gate had been left unlocked. His demeanor shifted quickly once he realized we were simply curious tourists. He grew curt and urged us to leave. We complied politely, avoiding any confrontation, and exited the building. We lingered around the exterior of the prison afterward, continuing our exploration of the grounds. My friend later remarked on the peculiarity of some performing official work while letting a large dog roam freely in the courtyard, but we didn't dwell on it too much. Our focus remained on the fascinating, if foreboding, architecture. Before long, a white crossover SUV sped into the parking area and pulled up close to where we stood. A woman emerged with a young child in tow. She wasted no time confronting us, directing us firmly toward the exit, stating that her partner, the man we'd spoken to earlier, had already informed us we didn't belong there. My friend attempted to reason with her briefly, but we ultimately decided to depart without escalating things. As we drove away, she trailed us to the parking lot gate and secured it shut behind us. Once we'd left the property, we double-checked the visitor information online and confirmed that public access to the exterior areas was generally allowed, especially as it was a known spot for casual visits outside of official hours. Later that evening, determined to make the most of our trip, we returned after dark. We parked in a more distant outer lot and waited quietly. While lingering near our vehicle in the shadows, we observed a pickup truck cruising slowly along the access road toward the prison. Hidden in the darkness, we went unnoticed as it passed, and then turned around, heading back the way it came. We debated our next move. Driving straight in risked immediate confrontation and being turned away for good. Instead, we opted for a stealthier approach, hiking on foot around the main driveway, scaling the sloppy grass embankment beside the road to avoid the illuminated parking area. Every so often, a powerful beam of light would arc high into the night sky from somewhere within the prison grounds. We assumed it was an automated spotlight, perhaps, part of the site's atmospheric features or security system. As we crept along the hillside, a revving engine echoed through the valley, what sounded like a dirt bike roaring somewhere past the lot. The noise reverberated off the surrounding hills before abruptly stopping. Moments later, chilling screams pierced the silence, distant, filled with terror, and unmistakably human. We froze, straining to listen as it echoed again. Huddled together, we whispered speculations. Perhaps other visitors, or even a late night paranormal tour group? In that tense pause, movement caught our eyes in the nearby darkness. At first, invisible against the underbrush, a feral hog materialized, shifting its weight and beginning to advance toward us. My friend, who'd encountered wild boars before, reacted instantly, seizing both of us by the arms and yanking us backwards. We retreated hastily, breaking into a full sprint toward the safety of our car. By then, the combination of the sweeping light, the dirt bike sounds, and the apparent activity convinced us that others must be present on the property. Maybe staff even set up, or private investigators. Emboldened, we decided to drive in openly, acting as if we belonged. As we proceeded up the road, we spotted the same pickup truck parked discreetly off to the side. The child was in the back seat, playfully aiming the flashlight beam upward into the sky, explaining the mysterious light we'd seen. Behind the truck, the man was operating a loud buzzing chainsaw. Nearby, the woman sat in her white crossover, keeping watch on the approach. She accelerated forward, positioning her vehicle to block our path. Lowering her window, she immediately warned us about calling law enforcement. My friend countered calmly, mentioning we'd verified the operating hours and rules. She claimed a personal connection to the owner, but refused to provide any contact details or names for verification. We turned around and left once more. Back on the main road, we contacted local police to clarify the situation. The officers confirmed that visitors were indeed permitted on the grounds, but strongly recommended avoiding a return that night, citing potential safety concerns. To this day, we never uncovered what those individuals were truly up to. Individually, each odd element, the loose dog, the chainsaw at night, the aggressive gatekeeping, could be rationalized innocently enough, but pieced together, the events of that unsettling evening painted a picture of something inexplicably off kilter, leaving an indelible sense of mystery that lingers whenever we recall our visit to Brushy Mountain. I genuinely believed I had dodged any trouble. Turns out I hadn't. Back in the fall of 2022, I was 21 and starting my freshman year at a small junior college, roughly 2 hours from my hometown. The distance felt just right, close enough for quick trips home, but far enough to enjoy real independence. The campus sat in a quiet rural area, surrounded by open fields and livestock. I lived in the dorms, a 3-story building that mostly housed art students, girls on the top floor, guys on the bottom, and the laundry facilities down in the basement. At first, everything felt ordinary. I began recognizing people around the building and on campus. Among them were a pair of twin brothers who lived there too. I'd spot them occasionally, but over time I heard more unsettling things about one of them, Adam. As a dance major, I shared a room with theater and music kids. One roommate, who was in theater, mentioned that several girls in her department had put together a formal petition the previous year. They'd collected signed statements detailing how Adam had stalked and harassed them, sending unwanted texts, tailing them, even showing up uninvited to events and gatherings. The school took no meaningful action. I could say a lot more about the administration's failures in various cases, but that's a separate issue entirely. Hearing all of this made me uneasy about sharing a building with him, but I counted myself fortunate. Adam had never approached me or shown any interest. I seemed to be off his radar completely. A few key details. The campus was tiny, with lots of international students, so hardly anyone owned a car, including Adam and his brother. They'd come from abroad to study here, something I learned during the welcome meeting at the start of the year with the RAs and all the residents. Winter break eventually arrived, and Adam was the furthest thing from my thoughts. I was heading 2 hours away for a full month, and since he'd never paid me any attention, I felt safe. I had plans to meet a friend from back home for dinner the night I got in. We always went to the same local spot. Our little college town basically only had a McDonald's, so this place was a treat. We wandered, sat down, and were chatting away when I glanced up and froze. There, at a table on the other side of the restaurant, was Adam. He was staring straight at me. I whispered to my friend right away. In that moment, it didn't fully sink in. It wasn't until we walked out the full weight hit me and I started shaking. How on earth had he ended up in my tiny hometown, 2 full hours from campus, inside the exact same restaurant at the exact same time? I knew for certain he didn't have a car. His brother wasn't with him either. There were much larger towns he could have reached in less than an hour by bus or whatever means he used. So, why here? Why my spot? When I returned to school after break, I learned that Adam and his brother had left the college and gone back home for good, as far as I know. Whether it was their decision or the school's, I never found out. To this day, just thinking about Adam sends chills through me. I stayed at that school until I earned my associate's degree in May of 2024, and I never crossed paths with either twin again. I still have no idea how he could have known I'd be at that restaurant at that exact time. Given his documented history, though, the whole thing has always felt deeply wrong. Adam, wherever you are, let's never cross paths again. This is my first time sharing this story. Most stories like this stretch out over time, but these two incidents happened so close together, just weeks apart, and they're eerily similar in how unsettling they were. So it makes sense to combine them into one account. By the end, it might come across as over the top or hard to swallow, but I promise every detail is exactly what I went through. No exaggeration. It all went down in early fall of 2003, around September or so. I was a senior in high school, still without a license, and my best friend Mark and I were deep into urban exploring. We'd already checked out a bunch of old barns, empty houses, and even this quirky spot locals called the underground gas station. It wasn't really underground, just camouflaged by trees from the old 70s design. But those were getting too easy, too predictable. We wanted something more challenging. That's when I came across mentions of Little People Village online, on those old, creepy location forums full of urban legends, abandoned asylums, and places like Deadly Town. The asylum angled tears in later. Bear with me. LBV was this weird miniature stone village built in the woods by some eccentric craftsman, complete with tiny houses and this out of place stone throne that people belonged to the king of the little people. The big legend: sit on the throne and you'd be cursed to die exactly 7 years later. Classic spooky folklore, right? Back then, the directions online were terrible, vague, conflicting. Nothing like the clearer info you find now. We spent weeks scouting different areas, covering a lot of ground. Eventually, we tracked it down a few miles off our starting point, squeezed between a green belt, a highway exit ramp, and some high tension power lines. It used to be a roadside stop along old trolley routes before the interstate killed that off. Super atmospheric with remnants of the old road still visible. And yeah, I did sit on that throne. Nothing happened immediately, but it's part of the setup. During one of those early scouting trips for LPV, a bit further up the same highway, we stumbled on this abandoned nursing home, hospice complex as a backup plan. Turns out, we ended up visiting this place way more often, probably a dozen plus times, because it was simpler to get into. The main building where everything went down was this T-shaped setup, like that Tetris piece. 2 stories plus a basement, with wings off a central hub. The only entry was through a smashed basement window. That basement always creeped me the most. You drop in and land in this big open area with an old piano, a small stage, and these eerie murals on the wall that felt strange, out of some Cold War era Eastern Bloc propaganda. The whole place showed signs of other visitors: graffiti, smashed furniture, dead birds, a few gross bathroom situations. No real squatter evidence or drug stuff, though, so we knew every corner, every hiding spot. One afternoon, Mark and I were messing around in the central ground floor area. We'd brought our super realistic BB guns and were shooting at random junk left behind. Harmless fun since it was already trashed. We'd been there maybe 40 minutes, thoroughly checked everything. Then, out of nowhere, heavy running footsteps erupted directly overhead on the second floor, heading left down one wing. It sounded like a massive guy, over 6 foot tall, 250 plus pounds, clumping in thick work boots. Being dumb teenagers with toy guns and bravado, we split up. Mark headed toward the noise via one stairwell. I took the other to block any escape. The footsteps never reached the stairs. To leave, you had to go through the basement. No other exits. We cleared rooms methodically, alternating, sweeping every inch. Nothing. No one could hide in the spots we knew about, especially not someone that size. The drop ceiling? No way it held that weight. After 45 minutes of intense searching, we gave up as dusk approached and headed out. Halfway back to Mark's truck, parked hidden in the lot corner, we both stopped cold. Same instant, no words. The unmistakable being watched hit us. We turned, slowly together. Up in the second floor corner window, near the stairs, was a disembodied head staring right at us. Classic ghostly look. Gaunt, gray, emaciated, dead-eyed ghoul face, floating there with no body, no support, faint misty haze around it. Even if you tried rationalizing it as a squatter, the heavy runner didn't match this thing at all. We both saw it clearly, and it was not human. That spot never gave us another scare after that. Plenty of people passed away there over the years, though. Who knows if the new condos built on it picked up any echoes. Now, the second thing happened within a couple of weeks, either right before or after hospice. This one involved an old asylum, Undercliff Sanitarium, tucked half a mile away down a service road off a highway overpass near our local mall. RIP to that place. Founded on the same sketchy early internet sites. It treated kids with TB and other illnesses back in the day. Maybe some troubled youth or mental health cases later. Shut down in the 90s, but parts were repurposed for state offices, including a police barracks, meaning heavy security. We never made it inside the main buildings. Later learned just how tight it was. Tried once with another friend and 2 girls. Got boxed in by 3 cop cars in under a minute while just driving around for photos. But one afternoon, Mark and I rolled up in his 90s manual Ford Ranger. We picked up the first small auxiliary building we saw, maybe 3 to 5,000 square feet, and parked smartly behind it on a concrete courtyard. away from obvious cameras. We locked everything: doors, windows that were manically cranked, even the rear slider and the diamond plate toolbox in the bed. Keyed lock. Did a quick parameter check for entry. Took 2 minutes max. Came across the corner and froze. Every single thing that could happen on the truck was wide open. All doors, windows, tailgate, hood, glove box, console, toolbox. No way anyone had time to do that and vanish. We weren't in a high crime spot exactly, but this was deep in the woods, a quarter mile off any road. No robbery, nothing taken, no cops either. They'd have waited or ticketed us. We noped out fast. Back home, I hit the old computer and dug deeper on Undercliff. Found a site with explorer stories, and one matched ours almost exactly. From the 1930s, a kid got stabbed to death with a makeshift weapon by other patients right in that courtyard area. The spot was known for mischievous activity, poltergeists like pranks. Later, an old aerial shot with security layouts confirmed our building was the only one that fit the description. Looking back, yeah, it sounds wild. Two major weird encounters in such a short window. But I swear, it's all real. I'm not someone who sees ghosts everywhere. I've had a few other paranormal brushes in my life, all different, all with witnesses, including growing up in a legitimately haunted house. I'm skeptical by nature and have never hallucinated. A random internet story doesn't prove anything, but there were always other people who saw the same things. Take it or leave it, but that's what happened. Years ago, under the fleeting glow of a dating app's promise, I crossed paths with a woman who seemed almost too good to be real. Let's call her Elena. Our messages flowed effortlessly: witty banter, shared laughs, quiet confessions that made the screen feel intimate. When we finally met, the chemistry ignited. She was warm, quick with a smile, disarmingly clever, and carried herself with an effortless allure that lingered in my thoughts long after each date ended. After several evenings out, dinners lit by candlelight, walks that stretched into late hours, she invited me to stay the night at her apartment, following a relaxed dinner and a film whose plot has since faded into haze. The anticipation hummed between us like static. We crossed that unspoken threshold with a tenderness that felt rare and electric. That night unfolded as one of those rare, perfect memories. Bodies entwined, whispered words, the kind of closeness that makes the world shrink to just two people. We drifted off, wrapped into each other, the room quiet except for our breathing. Then came the shatter. Glass exploded somewhere in the apartment, followed by the thunder of footsteps and low guttural voices. Two shadowed figures burst through the bedroom window, hooded and masked, moving with practiced menace. Adrenaline flooded me, but fear paralyzed any heroic impulse. They yanked me from the bed, rough hands bruising my arms as they hauled me into the living room. I thrashed uselessly, shouts muffled by panic. One intruder brandished a knife that caught the dim light like a cold promise. The other gripped a heavy baton, tapping it rhythmically along his palm. They bound me to a wooden dining chair with zip ties that bit into my wrists. Then they retrieved Elena more carefully, almost considerately, guiding her out rather than dragging her. She looked pale, eyes wide, but they didn't rough her up the way they had me. Suspicion, that old familiar poison, began to coil in my gut, even amid the terror. I am not proud of this trait. It has cost me dearly more than once. I analyze every detail, search for inconsistencies, convinced that trust is a luxury few can afford. In that moment, though, the fear drowned most thought. Yet, certain things lodged like splinters. How gently they handled her, how they ignored her belongings entirely. They rifled through my overnight bag with deliberate slowness. My watch, an expensive piece I'd foolishly brought, was dangled before my face. Real or fake? One growled. I lied, said fake. They laughed, low and mocking, and pocketed it anyway. My phone came next. They pressed the knife's edge close enough to Elena's arm that I could see the blade dimple her skin. Unlock it, they demanded, or watch her bleed. I complied, fingers trembling. They reset the passcode themselves, sealing their access to every digital corner in my life. Banking apps, payment services, personal messages. The violation felt intimate, invasive. My wallet followed. They scattered cards, plucked cash, and, most cruelly, tore apart a small photo I carried. My sister, her husband, and my young niece and nephew beaming in sunlight. They shredded it slowly, watching my face as if savoring the petty cruelty. Then abruptly, they vanished into the night, leaving the apartment eerily untouched except for the broken glass and my ruined pride. Nothing of Elena's had been taken, not a single drawer disturbed on her side. The police arrived in a blur of lights and questions. One detective lingered on the odd selectivity of the theft. How well do you know her? He asked quietly. Any chance she knew them? The seed took root. In the days that followed, Elena grew distant, texts unanswered for hours, conversations clipped. I pressed her. Who are they? Why only me? She insisted she had no idea, mentioning casually that an unlocked living room window had been the entry point. My response was sharp, accusatory. I wouldn't have stayed if I'd known the place wasn't secure. Silence followed. My messages escalated from cautious questions to pointed insinuations. How convenient, I wrote, that I was the only one robbed, that she emerged unscathed. She fired back, hurt turning to fury. I deserved every word of her anger. Trauma had stripped away my restraint, but that excuses nothing. I barely knew her, yet I let paranoia dictate. When the investigation stalled, no leads, no arrests, I let suspicion consume me entirely. I scoured her social media, digging until I found him. Her ex, a thin face with a perpetual sneer, posts dripping with wounded entitlement. His history included a juvenile brush with breaking and entering, quietly buried by wealthy parents. He and Elena had split publicly, dramatically. In my fevered mind, it all aligned. A staged breakup, a trap baited with Tinder profiles, victims like me lured in, robbed, humiliated. I even convinced myself one of the intruders was an acquaintance of mine who followed him online. A twisted web of connections that existed mostly in my head. I fed my theory to the police, whether they pursued it or not. I never learned. I severed contact with Elena completely, convinced she had orchestrated one of the darkest nights of my life. For months, I retold the tale to friends as a cautionary tender horror story. The woman who set me up. Then came the news that stopped my breath. A local report detailed a savage home invasion. A woman in our city had been brutally attacked by her jealous ex-boyfriend. Life-altering injuries, permanent scars. The victim was Elena. The perpetrator, that same Weasley ex. The pieces rearranged themselves in an instant, sickeningly clear. He had broken in that first night, not as part of any scheme with her, but out of possessive rage, to terrorize her new life, to punish her by targeting me. When that failed to drive suitors away, his obsession festered. He returned alone this time and unleashed something far worse. I had been half right about the danger, yet monumentally wrong about the source. Instead of standing by her, I had abandoned her to face him alone. Blinded by my own distrust, I accused an innocent woman, piled blame on her when she needed safety most. Years have passed, and the guilt remains a quiet, gnawing shadow. Forgiveness for myself feels distant. Asking it of her would only reopen old wounds. She has endured enough. All I can do now is carry the lesson. Suspicion can blind us to real threats, turning protector into perpetrator in our own quiet way. And sometimes the greatest betrayal is not the one we fear from others, but the one we inflict through our refusal to trust. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true scary stories, part 2. I'd like to take a moment and thank the other members of Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much for your continued dedication. I'm letting you know you are helping to hold this channel together, and I appreciate it more and more every single day. Without you all, I wouldn't have a voice. I'd be sitting here talking to myself, as I always say. So thank you so much for your love, dedication, and support. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. Until next time, please stay vigilant and please take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.